Note, this video contains mentions of suicide and harassment. Some of the visuals are supplementary. If you want to read all of them, pause. On June 23, 2025, it was reported that Mikayla Rains, known to millions as the founder of SaveAFox, ended her life. She was 29 years old. I was not previously aware of her before this and have only been learning of her since her death. In a heartbreaking video posted to the SaveAFox YouTube channel, her husband Ethan revealed the devastating truth. Mikayla had been driven to suicide by years of relentless harassment, both from people she knew online and from so-called snark communities, or snarkers, across Reddit, Tumblr, and Facebook.
For a few years, a group of people had been throwing dirt on Mikayla's name and the rescue. Most of these are people she knew, and some of them are other animal sanctuaries. They consistently spread ridiculous claims and rumors, and being the sensitive human that she was, Mikayla took it all to heart. And it hurt her. It hurt her a lot. But she pushed through. For years, she pushed through the pain of people trying to bring her down and the mental challenges she faced, and she still rescued hundreds of animals and changed the lives of so many. But recently, more of the rude words, accusations, and name-calling came from some of those she considered close friends. I think all of this stems from jealousy and envy. But she felt as if the entire world had turned against her.
Now, you might think this is just another tragic case of cyberbullying, but this is not your typical case of mean comments or internet trolls. This is a systematic case study in how digital platforms profit from organized harassment campaigns disguised as accountability, and how communities of obsessed individuals can literally drive someone to death while convincing themselves they are the good guys. Mikayla wasn't just an internet personality. She was an animal rescuer who dedicated her life to saving foxes from fur farms and educating the public about wildlife conservation. Through SaveAFox, she rescued hundreds of animals, including a massive operation that saved 500 foxes from a single fur farm. She was autistic, which gave her an extraordinary ability, some have said, to hyper-focus on animal welfare, but also made her extremely sensitive to criticism and social interaction. As her husband Ethan explained in his video,
Looking at her from the outside, you could never tell what was going on in her head, but even just socializing would send her over the edge. Looking at a cluttered restaurant menu would make her just want to leave. And wearing the jeans that she loved would give her so many sensory problems that it could ruin her entire day.
Despite struggling with autism, depression, borderline personality disorder, Mikayla built a massive following across social media platforms. Her videos of rescued foxes like Finnegan and Dixie went viral, bringing awareness to the horrors of the fur trade while showcasing the playful, intelligent personalities of these animals. But her sensitivity, the very trait that made her such an effective animal advocate, also made her a perfect target for what I'm going to call digital predators masquerading as critics. Before we dive into how quote-unquote snarkers and their communities destroyed Mikayla, let's understand their mindset. Based on years of posts and comments from these users, these types of people that I have observed, here's what I would call the snarkers' credo.
We are not bullies. We are accountability advocates. We are not obsessed. We are concerned citizens. We are not stalkers. We are researchers. Every photo we analyze, every decision we critique, every aspect of their life we dissect is justified because they chose to be public figures. We don't wish them harm. We just want them to be better people. If they can't handle criticism, they shouldn't be online. If our accountability drives them offline, or worse, that's not our fault. That's just proof that they were never fit for public life anyway.
This credo, in my view, allows snarkers to engage in the most vicious behavior while maintaining a sense of moral superiority. It's the perfect psychological framework for organized harassment. SaveAFox, from what I can tell, initially gained significant popularity on Tumblr during the platform's peak years, cultivating a substantial fan base. However, As often happens with popular subjects, this passionate following inevitably spawned an equally fervent opposition movement. This gave rise to the "is the X video cute" phenomenon, where individuals claiming expertise in animal behavior would analyze media content to determine whether it constituted animal cruelty. It's important to note that not all users adopting this username format participated in harassment, and they were not Mikayla's sole tormentors. Nevertheless, a network of individuals spread wildly fabricated allegations about Mikayla across the internet, with their activity visible on Reddit for years. These accusations ranged from claims of animal mistreatment to allegations of substance abuse, among other outlandish assertions. However, upon investigation, from what I can tell, none of these allegations were supported by credible evidence. Instead, they relied on easily manipulated materials like purported text message screenshots and other dubious documentation. These users, these snarkers, operated with relentless determination, actively seeking out Reddit posts, places on Tumblr about the rescue to distribute their compiled evidence dossiers in systematic character assassination attempts. One primary weapon against Mikayla was the snark subreddit r/SaveAFox snark, a Reddit community dedicated entirely to attacking her. The subreddit, captured by the Wayback Machine as early as October 2024, contained hundreds of posts tearing apart every aspect of her life, work, and character. This was not casual criticism, just to make that clear. This was coordinated documentation of a human being's existence for the purpose of finding fault. Multiple users posted obsessively about Mikayla, creating what can only be described as digital stalking portfolios. When she died, the subreddit quickly went private, but the damage was already done. Reddit's own content policy explicitly states, "Remember the human." Reddit's for community, not witch hunts. Yet Reddit's administrators allowed r/SaveAFox snark to operate freely, enabling the very witch hunt their policies claim to prohibit. This snark subreddit was not the only one. There are dozens, if not hundreds, of snark subreddits on Reddit that have the same intentions, the same sort of purpose. Now, how do we know that Mikayla was bothered by some of these posts online? I can already hear snarkers and others furiously typing,
She never even saw her Reddit.
well, from her own Reddit account, we can see using a tool that shows deleted comments and posts that she was on that subreddit, SaveAFox snark, as recently as May of 2025, arguing with the moderators there about their claims. Obviously, she was bothered by it. Now, there have been various rumors about the perpetrators of this SaveAFox snark subreddit, that they were people in the fur industry, that they were people she knew. And for one of the primary moderators of that subreddit, which had, I believe, over 50 members, Pale Explanation 709, who deleted their account after her suicide, comments and posts on Reddit are forever. Just because you deleted your account doesn't mean they're gone. I know who this person is. In the course of researching for this video, I was given the information. I'm not going to use it here, because that goes beyond the scope of this video. It's interesting, I think. People who snark often do so anonymously and run with their tails tucked if it seems like they might get in trouble. Why? Because they don't want to be exposed to the same kind of abuse, using anything that can be used to tear a person apart, that they subject others to. You might wonder, why mention that I know their identity at all then? I want everyone to understand something crucial. When you spend months posting about your life online, your hobbies, your pets, little details about where you live, posting publicly to the pages of rescues and humane societies, you create a trail. You think you're being careful, but you're not. One platform leads to another, one username connects to something else. Suddenly, people have your full name, location, contact information. All of it legally accessible through things you posted yourself and public records. This person thought they were safely hidden behind a screen, yet they've been broadcasting their identity without realizing it. The point is that with enough patience, if you are someone who harasses others online for months or years, in many cases people can piece together who you really are. Your cruel messages aren't coming from some untouchable void. They're coming from a real person with a real address living a real life. So, for other people out there who might have similar ideas, before you decide to destroy someone's day from behind your keyboard, remember, anonymous doesn't mean invisible. Your actions can have consequences, and increasingly, They may have your name on them. Regardless, instead of dwelling on what we can't say we know, let's talk more about what we do know of Mikayla's knowledge of our Save a Fox snark. What we do know is that she was very well aware of it, had been aware of it for a long time, and felt the need to comment there repeatedly to argue with the people there. Mikayla's husband also confirmed in 2 comments that she both saw the Reddit post about her and that they really brought her down. Unfortunately, Tumblr users, many of whom I suspect are probably the same people as on Reddit, along with her followers, took their harassment to even more disturbing levels. Operating under usernames like "Is the Owl Video Cute?", a person who describes themselves as a mean leftist and they really don't care what you think, thank you very much, and "What's this mustelid?", these accounts purported to be animal welfare experts while doing nothing but attacking a legitimate rescue. Let's name names here. The user "What's this mustelid" maintained running lists of every animal that died in Mikayla's care, including those not known to be dead, who died of old age, and who died of natural causes, weaponizing natural animal mortality against her. Other users implied her clothed photos with animals was sexual abuse. Another user, named "Is the Dog a Wolf Dog?", threatened to drag Mikayla to hell, while others still engaged in slut-shaming and personal attacks that had nothing to do with animal welfare. They really didn't seem to like her suggestive content. The scale of obsession was staggering. From what I have seen, individual users made hundreds of posts about Mikayla, cross-sharing content between accounts to amplify the harassment. After her death, some celebrated, with individuals like Servi or Chervi Death, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, who previously said they wanted Mikayla dead, indicating they were glad she's dead after her suicide. Again, this is after she's already died. One telling post on the Tumblr blog of "What's This Mustelid" after Mikayla's death read, "Save a Fox killed herself, which is genuinely sad as hell, and I wish she could have gotten help." What's This Mustelid replied, "No, I did not want this to happen. I wanted her to get mental help and improve as a person. I do not feel guilty for my post." Notice the structure. Performative sadness followed immediately by justification. This is the snarker's credo in action. And I can hear you furiously typing again. How did we know that she was bothered by these accusations on Tumblr and elsewhere that she bought from fur farms? Well, Juniper Russo addressed it herself in her post about Mikayla. She said that Mikayla and Save a Fox did not pay for the foxes themselves, but bought the cages and so forth. Mikayla herself addressed the criticisms she faced online about working with fur farms by stating that you need shared buy-in from fur farmers to get them to give you the foxes instead of killing them. Here's the video.
One of my last fur farm videos, I talked about how it is very important to be nice to the fur farms and not bash them in comments and so on and so on. And the reason being is because fur farmers know fur farmers who know fur farmers. And if we find a fur farm that is nice enough to work with us and nice enough to actually surrender their foxes instead of killing their foxes, then that's just awesome. So I told you guys just to be nice and, be thankful that the fur farms are actually working with us. And somebody sent a letter addressed to the fur farm that we're getting these foxes from. So I'm going to give them this letter. And of course, if anyone else wants to send letters that could help us in the future of, fur farmers talking to each other and being like, yeah, it's a very positive experience surrendering these foxes to this rescue. So if any other fur farm decides to stop fur farming, they might consider us instead of just pelting all the foxes because they got so much positive feedback. So let's just try that. And we want to help the foxes, right? We want to help them. So we just need to be very positive. We just have to be positive in every aspect because that's how positive things happen, right?
Another thing I find odd about this claim that it was just people she knew, well, we have pretty good indications that people she knew were involved in the online harassment. There was a lot of it. So no, it wasn't just these mysterious individuals offline. The people online directly contributed, and Mikayla was aware of them. The most insidious aspect of this harassment was how it disguised itself as animal advocacy. These weren't random trolls. They presented themselves as concerned animal welfare experts of a sort exposing alleged abuse. This gave their attacks a veneer of legitimacy that made them especially damaging. As Juniper Russo of For Fox's Sake Wildlife Rescue noted in a post where she addressed allegations like those found on Tumblr and Reddit, quote, "When documented animal abusers become your enemy, it's a sign you're doing things right." The harassment Mikayla experienced often came from individuals with their own histories of animal abuse, using attacks on ethical rescues to deflect from their own misconduct. It's rather like how climate change deniers position themselves as skeptical scientists exposing the climate hoax. The costume of legitimacy and authority and understanding makes the underlying agenda much more effective. I want to talk a little bit about the phenomenon of snark in general before I move on to finishing up the review of what's happened with Mikayla Rains. Research by Martin et al. 2023 found that snark communities emerged from corrupted parasocial relationships. When followers felt betrayed or exploited by social media influencers, or SMIs as the researchers called them, they formed anti-fan communities that sustained negative parasocial relationships while reconstructing lost intimacies through hatred, especially shared hatred. These communities provided all the social benefits of fandom, belonging, shared identity, community bonding, but they channeled them through destruction rather than creation. Members escalated their negativity to gain acceptance, creating a feedback loop of increased toxicity. Cognitive psychology research has shown that threatening situations impair logical reasoning and increase intergroup bias. When people experience threat or crisis conditions, their cognitive resources become limited, leading them to rely on mental shortcuts and heuristics rather than systematic reasoning. Threatening situations activate us versus them categorization, where people become more likely to favor their in-group and show hostility toward out-groups. Now, is this sort of phenomenon limited only to big disasters? No, of course not. I chose this study and excerpt not because they perfectly match the scenario at hand, but because they describe well a psychological and social phenomenon that has many applications. Unfortunately, errors in human reasoning and our tendency toward binary thinking are pervasive problems, not relegated to the worst disasters and crises. Snark communities thrive on this type of binary thinking, reducing complex situations to simple good versus evil narratives. They make a crisis of everything a person says or does. In the case of Mikayla Rains, the crisis, in their estimation, was that she was abusing and killing animals. Emotionally charged narratives blur people's perception of consequences, making them more accepting of extreme measures. In snark communities, this manifests as escalating harassment that members justify as necessary accountability. Research on social proof has shown what we know from our lived experience, that individuals conform to peer norms for acceptance and validation. In snark communities, this creates participatory radicalization where members compete to produce the harshest, most cutting commentary to gain status within the group. In the case of Mikayla Rains, what probably started as mild criticism in some cases evolved into obsessive documentation, doxing, and systematic character assassination. Members didn't see themselves as bullies. They saw themselves as justice warriors exposing fraud and abuse. As I mentioned earlier, Reddit allegedly has clear policies against harassment and witch hunts, yet consistently fails to enforce them against snark subreddits. Snark subreddits generate massive amounts of content, comments, and user activity, all of which translates to advertising revenue. Social media algorithms prioritize engagement over accuracy. Reddit's algorithm, like many social media algorithms, has actively promoted emotionally charged content, creating a financial incentive to ignore harassment. It's the same business model that, for example, keeps climate denial blogs profitable. Controversy drives clicks, and clicks drive revenue. Tumblr in particular has long fostered a culture of obsessive documentation and call-out posts that have destroyed individuals based on incomplete information or ideological disagreements time and time again. The platform's structure, with easy reblogging and minimal moderation, make it perfect for coordinated harassment campaigns. The "Is the X video cute" format that targeted Mikayla represented a particularly insidious form of harassment. Uncertain, if not false, expertise used to attack legitimate professionals. These users position themselves as animal welfare authorities while contributing nothing positive to animal rescue. As for Facebook, which we know to be a cesspool, it provided another lesser vector for harassment. Besides the mean comments, I did not see that the harassment there was as broad in scope as on Reddit and Tumblr in particular. However, the harassment Mikayla did experience on Facebook, including especially damaging accusations of fraud, I will revisit near the end. Unfortunately, Mikayla's autism made her hypersensitive to criticism and social rejection. It is well documented that sustained online ridicule causes exceptional stress, anxiety, and depression, but for autistic individuals, these effects can be magnified. Her borderline personality disorder, characterized by emotional instability and fear of abandonment, made the online attacks especially devastating. As Mikayla's husband Ethan explained in his video,
she had always battled with borderline personality disorder causing emotional instability as well as impulsive behaviors. But this time it went too far. She couldn't bear what she was feeling any longer. And she ended her life. And it breaks my heart that someone who is selfless and devoted her life to animals could have so much negativity pointed at her. Why? That's all I can ask is why. In a world that's filled with darkness, she was just light. She was just light. And to those of you that pushed her to this, every one of you that had been responsible for making her feel this way, I wish you had to see me find her.
Taking all these things together, this wasn't a single incident of cyberbullying. It was years of systematic harassment across multiple platforms. Mafte et al. 2022 linked misinformation-based cyberbullying to compulsive internet use. For targets who must be online, this can create a cycle where victims cannot escape their tormentors. Mikayla couldn't simply log off. Her rescue work required social media presence for fundraising and awareness. She was trapped in a system where staying online meant facing constant attack, but going offline meant abandoning the animals she'd dedicated her life to saving. In Mikayla's own words, from a video posted months before her death,
"Sometimes I just need to speak my truth. And a lot of people say that this is a dream job. What I do is amazing. It looks like so much fun. And most of it is not. Most of it's not fun. Foxes are my favorite animal. I'm really blessed that I get to work with them. But you guys only see what you see from a social media perspective. And I work so much that the time I actually get to spend with my animals is time I spend recording my time with them, which really actually just takes away the moment, because have to be so focused on recording the moment so that everyone else can see it, so that we can get donations, that I never actually get to have the good moments with them anymore. Because if I choose to have my own moments with them and not record, that is money that could have been raised for the animals. So, of course, I'm always going to choose to try to raise money for the animals. But it's exhausting. It's been a long time since I've been able to just hang out with them and not have to worry about making content. But if I don't make content, we don't raise funds. That's just the fact of how it is. Like 90%, I feel like 90% of our funds are made through the social media content we make. So, it really sucks. I don't have a ton of time to spend with my animals. I know social media might make it look like I'm hanging out with animals all day, but I'm working or making content for everyone else to watch. I mean, having fun with the animals. But I can't really enjoy it when I'm just looking at a screen, trying to make sure they're centered in it. And that's how I'm feeling today. Yep.
Following Mikayla's death, the platforms that enabled her harassment remained largely silent. Reddit took days to ban Save a Fox Snark, Too Little Too Late. The Tumblr users who tormented her continue to post with minimal consequences. They are still posting about her. Many of these people and groups will simply move on to new targets. Some of her harassers have expressed no remorse. As I said, as What's This Mustelid put it, they never wished death on her but didn't regret any of their conduct. Okay. After much backlash, What's This Mustelid did admit they made some mistakes. A factual error here, forgot to tell people not to mob their victim there. Really, they're not even at fault, and they'd like it if you could stop pestering them about it. Of course it's not only your fault, What's This Mustelid? That isn't the point. You say you only had passing thoughts about Mikayla. Let's define in passing. Merriam-Webster defines it as, quote, by way of interjection or digression. That's a little pedantic, isn't it? Let's assume then that Mustelid meant passing thoughts about Mikayla to mean they rarely thought about her. But your old feed, Mustelid, tells another story, doesn't it? Why do I say old feed? Well, Mustelid has moved to a new Tumblr blog called Martin Fang. They want you to know they're ready to just move on with a clean slate. It is interesting they need a clean slate, however, considering their claim they barely thought about Mikayla and Save a Fox at all. Surely there wasn't much on the old blog then to deal with. And surely nothing stated on Tumblr, true or false, based on incomplete information or sheer speculation, could ever leave Tumblr and find other social media platforms or even Mikayla herself, right? In any case, this incident represents the ultimate failure of social media like Tumblr and Reddit to create accountability for the communities they host and profit from. And it's really been driving me insane, the reporting on this story. I'm reading headlines and articles and it says online bullying and harassment. Online bullying and harassment. No mention of where the harassment was taking place. I'm sure there are some out there, but the majority, they just give this nebulous concept of harassment. Mikayla's death wasn't an isolated incident. Juniper Russo noted in her post that Mikayla's death echoes a tragic pattern seen far too often among animal rescuers, who face unique mental health challenges due to the emotional demands of their work combined with public scrutiny. The animal rescue community is especially vulnerable to this type of harassment because rescuers often operate in the public eye for fundraising purposes while dealing with emotionally traumatic work. Snark communities exploit this type of vulnerability, using the rescuer's public presence against them. This is really true of any sort of influencer who has a snark community. We have an ethical imperative. Snark communities justify their actions as holding public figures, quote-unquote, accountable. But this is a fundamental misunderstanding of what accountability means. True accountability involves constructive feedback aimed at improvement, delivered through appropriate channels by qualified individuals. What these communities engage in is not accountability. It is public humiliation designed to cause maximum emotional and probably financial and social damage. The goal isn't to help improve targets. It is to destroy them for entertainment. It's rather like the difference between peer review and legitimate scientific journals and the pay-to-play predatory journals. One serves a constructive purpose, the other exists purely for profit and ego. Social media platforms cannot claim neutrality when their algorithms actively promote harmful content. Snarkers, like the media outlets of old, influence public perception by selectively emphasizing certain topics and pieces of information while downplaying or attacking the sources of others. When platforms like Reddit, Tumblr, and Facebook allow snark communities to flourish, they become active participants in character assassination campaigns. So, before we finish this, let's talk briefly about solutions. I am a solution-oriented person. It is beyond the scope of this video to deal with and detail any possible solutions in great depth. The video would be hours long. Instead, I will offer some immediate ideas. Feel free to expand on them or repudiate them in the comments. Let's start with thinking about Section 230. What is Section 230? Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act shields online platforms from legal responsibility for the content their users post. Essentially, it treats platforms as neutral conduits rather than publishers, meaning they can't be sued for hosting defamatory, harassing, or harmful user-generated content, even when they're aware of it. In my view, social media companies must be held legally liable somehow for the harassment they enable. Current Section 230 protections were designed for a different internet era and need updating to address the systematic abuse these platforms now facilitate. Specific reforms to Section 230 could include mandatory proactive moderation of harassment-focused communities, algorithmic changes that don't reward engagement with harmful content, real consequences for platforms that consistently fail to protect users, transparency requirements for online moderation decisions. Before you get mad at me and yell, "Section 230 is a pillar of democracy and central to freedom of expression," I'm not saying we need to scrap Section 230 entirely. Obviously, social media platforms could not exist if they could be held responsible for everything done or posted on their platforms. But what happens to people like Mikayla Rains is exceptional, and at the same time all too common. We also have to stop pretending every public figure or even social media influencer is equal. As Mustelid said, Mikayla wasn't some evil dictator. She was just a woman with a fox rescue. We can expect someone like her to cope with abuse as well as, for example, a politician. Standing, social, and legal support and resources are not equal among public figures. Is this really the type of social media we want, where people can mob harass a person with limited means and high visibility essentially to death, under the guise of criticism, without consequences outside of public shaming? I don't think this is sustainable. Users must recognize their own role in these systems. Every upvote, share, and comment on harassment content makes someone complicit in potential harm. As Juneja et al. 2020 discussed, a common sentiment among Reddit moderators is that snarky comments, although potentially entertaining, typically fail to contribute substantively to discussions. As one former snarker reflected in Fundy Snark, I think the problem with snarking is just that it's mean at its core. That's when it really kind of hit me that snarking in general is actually just kind of a fucked up thing to do. Well put. Animal rescuers, content creators, and public-facing professionals need better mental health resources and legal protections. The current system places all responsibility on individual targets to defend themselves against coordinated attacks by anonymous mobs. Mikayla Rains died in part because we have created a digital ecosystem that rewards cruelty and punishes compassion. She dedicated her life to saving animals and educating the public, but our platforms gave more power to her destroyers than her supporters. This tragedy was perhaps preventable. Reddit could have banned Save a Fox Snark sooner. Tumblr could have suspended the accounts obsessively documenting Mikayla's life and work for the sake of attacking her. Facebook could have shut down attacks against her. In many cases, they chose not to because, well, engagement from harassment can be profitable. Every day, these platforms continue operating without fundamental changes. They are choosing their profits over human lives. Mikayla Rains paid the ultimate price for that choice. How many more people will die before we demand better? The snarkers who helped drive Mikayla down are still active, even if some have deleted their accounts or migrated to new ones. Undoubtedly, they will target new victims, be rewarded by algorithms designed to promote engagement at any cost. Her death changes nothing, unless we force it to change something. But here's what really gets me. Her worst critics weren't even doing the real work. The people making genuine, detailed, evidence-based critiques of animal welfare practices aren't posting obsessively on Reddit and Tumblr. They are working with regulatory agencies, writing proper reports, and implementing actual reforms. The snarkers contributed nothing to helping Mikayla's animals. They built nothing, they saved no animals, They existed and exist purely to tear down someone who was actually doing the work they claimed to care about. Imperfectly, perhaps, but she was doing it. Some of Mikayla's words on her personal struggles with content creation were, sadly, prophetic.
I never actually get to have the good moments with them anymore. Because if I choose to have my own moments with them and not record, that is money that could have been raised for the animals. So, of course, I'm always going to choose to try to raise money for the animals.
She died creating content for others while strangers on the internet documented her every perceived flaw for their own entertainment. This is what we built. This is what we allowed. This is what helped to push Mikayla Rains to suicide. We know who allegedly delivered the so-called final blow. I won't out them here, that isn't my place. But what I can say is that it was someone who worked with Mikayla and turned betrayer, spreading allegations and rumors that gained credibility precisely because they came from someone who had once been trusted and close. Then that person has tried to farm sympathy for Mikayla's death, after her death. But the pain that drove Mikayla to take her own life wasn't created by one individual or in a vacuum. Online bullying was a substantial factor, as Mikayla's husband Ethan has stated. Suicide is nearly always the result of many pressures building over time, a cascade of cruelty, of misery, that becomes unbearable. From the information that I have read, the final blow was devastating precisely because it came from within, from someone who knew the vulnerabilities, who could weaponize trust, and allegedly the IRS, in the most destructive way possible. When those who have been close to us turn against us, the pain can cut deep. When we tear down people who dedicate their lives to helping others, whether those others are people or animals, we don't just hurt that person. We hurt everyone who could benefit from their good work. We discourage others from stepping up to help. The cost of choosing cruelty is too high. Lives depend on us doing better. The next target could be anyone, and they deserve more than what we gave Mikayla. Things do not have to be this way.